Hi, my name is Elena Monroe. I'm 37. I wear a naval uniform with quiet pride. But on that morning, I wasn't wearing stars or ribbons. I was wearing a simple navy coat and a badge clipped to my purse, just enough for entry, not enough to be seen. I came early like I always do for my brother's award ceremony at Norfolk Naval Station. He was being honored for leading a successful security escort in the Persian Gulf. My family would be there smiling like it was Christmas. And I, the eldest child, the one who was never quite enough, was not listed. They didn't forget my name. They left it off. I stood in front of the security checkpoint, the morning sun bouncing off the glass badge reader, the metal gate humming with automation. The young sailor scanned the list twice, then looked up polite but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the family guest list for Lieutenant Jason Monroe." He turned his tablet around. I saw the names Donald Monroe, Helen Monroe, and Natalie Monroe, Jason's wife. No Elena. No sister. Not even an additional guest. Just absence, loud, precise, and cruel. It wasn't the first time I'd been left out of a family photo. But this time, it came with a digital record. Behind the gate, black SUVs were arriving one by one. Polished shoes. Metals gleaming in sunlight, men saluting women adjusting caps. Then I saw it, the dark sedan I knew too well, my parents' car. Jason stepped out first in his full dress whites medals, aligned perfectly, smile practiced. He looked right at me, saw me, recognized me, and then turned to Natalie and chuckled loud enough to carry. Probably just a logistics mix-up. She's always been more admin than action. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Inside, something shifted, not broke, but tightened, like steel wire pulling taut. My mother walked past me like I was a statue on the lawn. Not a glance. She adjusted Jason's collar, smoothed his lapel, and smiled up at him like he was already Admiral. My father gave me the same nod he might give to an usher or a valet. No one vouched for me. No one turned back. I stood there, spine locked in place, watching them disappear past the checkpoint, like I was forgotten luggage at the curb. A gust of wind swept my hair sideways. The sailor cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply nodded and stepped back, heels clicking against the concrete. But I didn't walk away. Not yet. I moved into the shadow of the gate's side column, half hidden, half watching. Not because I was desperate, but because something inside me had crystallized. Cold, clear, final. Let them carry on with their show. Let them revel in the pageantry, the applause, the high-profile handshakes, because they had no idea, none who they were keeping on the other side of that gate. They didn't know what I had done the night before, what operation I had led. What report bearing my name was already sitting on the desk of Admiral Petra Collins. They didn't know the truth because it was still classified. But the truth has a way of arriving sometimes with fanfare, sometimes with silence, and sometimes with 2 silver stars pinned quietly on the shoulders of the woman you didn't think to invite. So I waited in the shadows, not for revenge, but for the moment when silence would no longer be denial. It would be mine. There's a reason I stopped trying to explain what I do to my family. When people hear naval intelligence, they imagine spy gadgets and movie plots. When my parents hear it, they imagine me in a cubicle, eyes glazed, fighting with Excel formulas and printer jams, maybe handing out schedules at briefings with someone else doing the real work. My brother once joked that I coordinate coffee for commandos. My mother laughed. My father didn't correct him. And maybe that's what they wanted to believe, because anything else would have required them to reframe everything they thought they knew about what mattered, and more importantly, who mattered. But they were wrong. That morning, the same one I'd been denied entry at the gate, was the day after I'd completed an all-night live op. No sleep, Just black coffee and satellite feeds, the hum of encryption servers, and a war room where every decision could take or save a life. We'd been tracking a situation off the coast of Somalia, a civilian freighter hijacked by pirates, likely funded by a regional militia. 11 lives aboard. The mission rescue. Covert clean and no casualties. I wasn't on a ship. I wasn't holding a rifle. But I was commanding. I sat in a sealed steel-gray control room 7 stories below sea level at the Atlantic Command Center. One entire wall pulsed with digital overlays, heat signatures, wave patterns, unmanned drone visuals, encrypted comms from recon units. The SEAL team we deployed moved fast, precise. But even precision can stumble into chaos without oversight. As their extraction boat approached the freighter, I noticed secondary movement on Thermal 2 skiffs circling the starboard side. I keyed in. Viper 1 hold. Repeat hold. New movement detected at 045. Skiff 1, 6 heat signatures. Armed, unflagged. Copy that command, came the gruff reply through static. Adjusting approach. I exhaled. A breath I hadn't known I was holding. We rerouted delayed breach by 5 minutes. That saved them. Later intel confirmed what I suspected: the second vessel was a mobile ambush point, a kill zone. Had they proceeded, we would have lost 3 men. One of those men, Sergeant Miguel Rivas. His name hit me differently when I read the mission debrief, because I remembered it from years ago. Rivas had once served directly under Jason in Bahrain. I remember Jason mentioning him at dinner once casually, like he was a background character in his heroic story. And now, years later, it was me the sister Jason never took seriously who'd just saved Rivas's life. Funny how that works. What's even more ironic, while I was intercepting thermal reads and coordinating real-time drone positioning to keep that team alive, Jason was texting me. Hope you're enjoying DC, sis. Try not to spill coffee on your spreadsheets. I didn't respond. I didn't have the hands to spare or the patience. I stared at the screen, at the faint heat blooms indicating lives, weapons, danger. And somewhere between that text and that silence, something inside me drew a line. They would never understand what I did not, because I couldn't explain it, but because they never wanted to listen. It's easier to believe the woman behind the screen is irrelevant than to admit she might be the reason your medal ceremony isn't a memorial. They saw numbers when they should have seen command. They saw formulas when they should have seen fire. They saw the form of me, not the force of me, but someone else had seen. General Petra Collins. And soon, the world would too. My grandfather's box lives on the top shelf of my closet behind a stack of folded navy sweatshirts and an old pair of boots I never had the heart to toss. It's no bigger than a shoebox. Mahogany worn smooth with time. Brass hinges dulled by age. It smells faintly of cedar and dust, like time itself has been hiding inside. He gave it to me on my 25th birthday. I had just been promoted to lieutenant. I remember how proud he looked, even though he never said much. My grandfather wasn't a man of speeches, not like my father, who filled silence with opinions. Grandpa Monroe, on the other hand, believed silence could be a form of truth. He served in the Navy during an era that didn't have room for complexity. He was brilliant, fluent in Russian, trained in signals intelligence, but he never made captain. Promotions stalled. Recommendations mysteriously vanished. My grandmother once whispered that he was too sensitive for a man and too smart for his own good. But I knew better. He wasn't passed over because he lacked ability. He was passed over because he made the men around him uncomfortable, especially those who couldn't outthink him. He never complained. But the look in his eyes when he gave me that box? It was the look of someone handing over, not just an object, but a legacy denied. Inside, there was a folded note on aged parchment. His handwriting was sharp and intentional. Use this when you feel they're writing the wrong version of your story. Beneath the note, a small bronze coin, an unofficial commendation token from a mission he helped lead in silence, never recognized. He wanted me to know even the forgotten have artifacts. For years, I never touched the box. I kept it closed like a sealed chapter. I told myself I hadn't earned the right to open it. Or maybe, truthfully, I was afraid that once I did, I'd have to admit I needed it. Then came Ava's letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope with careful childlike handwriting, the kind that presses too hard with the pencil and forgets to erase the guidelines. My commanding officer handed it to me without comment, just a nod. Inside was a single sheet of paper lined and slightly wrinkled. Dear Miss Elena, my name is Ava. My daddy is Sergeant Miguel Rivas. He said you saved his life. I love him very much. Thank you for keeping him safe. I hope you have someone who loves you too. I sat at my desk reading that last line over and over. I hope you have someone who loves you too. That sentence didn't feel like pity. It felt like recognition. The kind I never received from the people who shared my blood, but came freely from a child who had no reason to lie. 2 weeks later, Admiral Petra Collins's assistant called. I was summoned to a private office in D.C., overlooking the Pentagon's North Lot. Collins poured 2 cups of black coffee and didn't waste time. Sergeant Rivas requested we declassify the op. Said he owes you his life. I said nothing. She set Ava's letter on the table between us. He's not the only one who noticed. This letter made its way to the top. She leaned forward. And I agree with the girl. It's time they knew. It's time they got the right version of your story. That night, I drove home in silence. No music, no calls, just the road and the weight of that moment pressing into my chest. When I got home, I stood in front of my closet, reached past the boots, took the box down with both hands, and for the first time in a decade, I opened it. The note was still there, and I knew without question that the time had come. Tomorrow, I wouldn't wait for permission. Tomorrow, I'd begin to tell the truth. Ceremonies always made me feel like an intruder. The clapping, the polished speeches, the flag folding with precision too sharp to feel human. Even when I was invited, which wasn't often, I stayed near the back, comfortable in the shadows. That morning, I didn't expect to be allowed past the gates again. But I was. My name was suddenly and very officially on the list. No explanation was offered by the guards who'd turned me away days before. Their posture was stiffer now, eyes sharper, voices slightly too polite. I walked past the same checkpoint with a different kind of silence trailing behind me. Not the kind born from rejection, but the kind born from purpose. Inside the base's open-air assembly hall, the crowd was already gathering. Rows of families in folding chairs under white tents. Navy personnel lined up in perfect columns, brass gleaming, flags fluttering under a clear Virginia sky. My family sat near the front right-hand side, proud and poised like a painting. Jason was already in the wings rehearsing his walk. He looked the part. He always did. I stood near the back, close to the last row, unnoticed again until the engine started. At first, it was just a distant hum. Then came the unmistakable rumble of armored tires grinding gravel. Heads turned. Even the flag detail paused. The lead security officer spoke into his mic, his eyes scanning the gate. Then, with surreal precision, a black Navy SUV rolled to a slow halt outside the white canopy. 4 stars on the flag fluttering from the front fender. I knew who it was before the door opened. Admiral Petra Collins, full dress whites, no aide beside her, no fanfare trailing her arrival. Just a steel gaze and the presence of someone who had nothing left to prove. A murmur swept through the ranks. Whispers passed from one officer to another. The Admiral doesn't attend regional award ceremonies. She hadn't been to one in 3 years. Why now? She walked with purpose, cutting through the crowd like the tide through seawater. I stayed where I was, still behind the last row, until she stopped. Right beside me. She looked directly at me, no hesitation, no preamble, and said in a voice that rang across the entire parade ground, "Commander Monroe, stand with me." Every head turned. Like a synchronized machine, the entire crowd shifted. People searched for who she was speaking to. And then they saw me. Jason's head turned last. I watched recognition bloom into disbelief. His mouth parting slightly, his grip on the folder in his hands tightening just enough to make it tremble. My mother blinked rapidly. My father leaned forward, squinting as though his eyes couldn't trust what they were seeing. I stepped forward, not rushed, not hesitant, measured. The same way I walked into every classified mission briefing, every moment of calm before calculated chaos. Admiral Collins didn't speak again until I stood beside her at the front of the formation. Her presence was iron. Her voice low enough only I could hear now. "They won't forget this moment," she said. I nodded once. Neither will I. From the platform, the Master of Ceremonies looked frozen, unsure whether to proceed with Jason's introduction. Admiral Collins stepped up, adjusted the mic slightly, and began, "We have an unexpected but long overdue addition to today's honors." Silence swept the tent. No one moved. Not even Jason. Not even my father, whose fingers were still frozen around the armrest. Not even my mother, who lowered her eyes for the first time in a long time. Because the ceremony had just shifted. And it wasn't for the golden sun anymore. The tide had turned. And it had a new name. The sound of polished shoes against concrete never used to mean anything to me. But as I walked behind Admiral Collins toward the stage, it echoed with an unfamiliar rhythm. Not fear, not pride exactly, but something closer to arrival. I wore full dress blues for the first time outside a secure facility. Silver oak leaves shimmered on my collar. My service ribbons, normally boxed in a drawer, sat lined and visible on my chest. For once, I wasn't operating behind satellite feeds or encrypted lines. I was seen. We passed rows of uniformed officers who stood straighter as we walked by. Conversations ceased. Some saluted quietly. Others simply watched, brows furrowed, questions hanging on the edge of their lips. I saw Jason ahead center stage, holding his citation folder like it was a torch he'd earned alone. He didn't see me at first. His eyes were on the Admiral, on his Admiral, or so he thought. He stepped forward as the MC adjusted the microphone. The script resumed as if nothing had shifted. Lieutenant Jason Monroe is recognized today for leadership in escort operations under hostile risk near the Strait of Hormuz. I stood to the side as Jason took the stage. He smiled, nodded, thanked his commanding officer, his incredible tactical team, and finally our parents who beamed like they were seated at a coronation. Not once did he mention the voice that had kept his unit from walking into a trap. Not once did he say my name. I wondered if he even knew, or if denial was just easier than gratitude. Applause rippled through the rows. Jason stepped back, metal gleaming. The MC turned, clearly ready to close the ceremony. But Admiral Collins raised a hand. "One moment," she said calmly. The air shifted again. "We have an unscheduled addition to today's proceedings," she began. Voice steady, deliberate. "For reasons of national security, this commendation has remained classified until this moment." Whispers bloomed like wildfire. She continued, We are here not just to honor those who stand on deck, but also those who command from the shadows, whose voices over radio lines save lives, even if their names remain hidden. My breath held itself. Commander Elena Monroe. A pause. Then the Admiral turned fully toward the crowd, and her voice rang louder. Leader of Operation Aquila. The one who redirected a SEAL team from a fatal ambush. Who coordinated a multi-nation rescue with 0 casualties. The reason Sergeant Miguel Rivas and 10 other souls are standing today. I heard a sharp gasp, then silence. Not stunned admiration. Not yet. Recognition trying to process reality. I stepped forward up the platform. One foot, then the other. Jason looked at me like I was someone else entirely, like he was seeing my face for the first time through a cracked lens. My mother's lips parted, but she said nothing. My father blinked eyes, squinting jaw tight. Admiral Collins turned to me, and with all the weight and ceremony in her posture, pinned a metal silver weighty engraved just above my ribbons. She leaned in. About damn time. The crowd stood. Not because they were told, but because something inside them knew. They hadn't just seen a commendation. They'd just witnessed a correction. And finally, for the first time, I stood, not behind, but among them. In full view. In full right. In full truth. Applause swelled behind me, a rising tide of sound that didn't quite reach my chest. I wasn't numb, not exactly, but I had become something else. Still, anchored, watching. I turned toward the crowd only after Admiral Collins stepped back. She gave me space the way seasoned leaders do by knowing when to disappear without leaving. The Master of Ceremonies hesitated, unsure whether to resume the scheduled program or surrender it altogether. He glanced at Collins. She gave a subtle nod, and then he said it. Today's recognition wouldn't be complete without acknowledging the strategic command behind Operation Aquila. While Lieutenant Jason Monroe's team was in the field, it was Commander Elena Monroe who was directing the rescue from Naval Intelligence Command, identifying threats, halting the breach, and ultimately saving lives. There it was. The truth no longer whispered in classified corridors or sealed in mission logs. Out loud. In front of them. In front of everyone. He went on. Words about precision leadership and decision-making under pressure. But I only heard one sentence echoing. She saved them. I didn't look at the crowd first. I looked at my brother. Jason stood off to the side of the stage, the silver around his neck now seeming smaller, duller somehow. His hands were at his sides, fingers twitching slightly. A man used to being honored now forced to hear his triumph reframed. His eyes met mine. For the first time, he didn't smile. He didn't deflect with a joke or raise an eyebrow. He just stared, pale, still stripped of that untouchable gleam he wore like armor. My parents sat in the front row just left of center. My father, rigid as always, had his arms folded, but his mouth had flattened into something unreadable. My mother's fingers, the same ones that used to fix Jason's lapel, were knotted in her lap. She whispered something to him. He didn't respond. They both turned slowly to look at each other, as if asking the same question in different words. Did you know? Did we ever really see her? They weren't ready for the answer. I scanned the room. Rows of uniforms and civilians now on their feet. People I'd never met, who'd never shaken my hand or known my name standing because they understood. Or maybe because they recognized something familiar, the quiet one who'd been written out of the story finally getting a chapter of her own. But in the middle of all those rising bodies, 3 remained seated. Jason, Helen, Donald, a family of statues. Eyes wide, mouths shut, back straight, as if movement would fracture whatever image they were trying to hold on to. I stood tall, no anger in my chest, no satisfaction either, just a kind of confirmation. Not that I had proven anything, but that I no longer needed to. As I turned to leave the stage, I passed Jason. I didn't stop. I didn't break stride. But something pulled me one last look. He met my eyes again, and this time he lowered his gaze. No words, no apology, just a gesture. Simple, human, long overdue. It wasn't defeat. It wasn't shame. It was recognition. And that after all the silence, all the dismissals, all the years of being seen through and not seen, was enough. For now. It was early spring when I went back to the house I grew up in. The magnolia tree in the front yard had bloomed a little unevenly, branches stretching toward the porch like they were trying to remember how sunlight worked. The bricks still held the same red warmth they had when I was 13, standing barefoot in the driveway holding my science fair ribbon while Jason showed off his new baseball trophy. This time, I didn't come uninvited. My mother had called 2 weeks earlier. Her voice had been cautious, but not cold. She asked if I'd come by when I had time, adding almost as an afterthought, "Your father said it would mean a lot." It wasn't an apology. But it was more than I'd ever been given. So, I went. The house smelled the same, a mix of old leather, faint cinnamon, and some floral candles she'd always kept burning in the hallway. But something else was different. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. I stood just inside the living room where decades of framed photos lined the walls. Jason in uniform. Jason graduating from Annapolis. Jason and Natalie with their new baby. And then right in the center, beneath the mantel, where the old Monroe family shadow box used to hold only our grandfather's flag, and Jason's commendation was a new case, a handcrafted wooden display. Inside my Distinguished Service Medal, and next to it, a framed still of Admiral Collins pinning it to my chest. On the far right, not in the corner, not tucked away, was a photograph of me, standing tall, full uniform, eyes steady. It stopped me, not because I hadn't seen the medal before, but because I had never been placed there, not in this house, not in their story. I didn't need to touch it. I didn't need to ask why. I already knew. Behind me, footsteps approached. I didn't have to turn. Jason's voice came soft, more gravel in it than I remembered. "I wanted to put it higher," he said. "But Mom said it had to be eye level." I smiled faintly. "She's right." He stepped beside me, but didn't look at the case. "Can I say something that might not come out right?" I glanced at him. "You usually do." He almost laughed, then fell quiet again. "That day, on the water, it wasn't just my team you kept alive." He swallowed. "It was me, the version of me that needed to believe I earned everything, the one who needed to feel like the only hero in the family." He finally looked at the photo. "You didn't just save us. You made me stop lying to myself." I didn't say anything, not because I didn't have words, but because they weren't needed. Forgiveness, I'd learned, doesn't always arrive as an apology. Sometimes it's a photo centered. Sometimes it's your brother finally standing beside you, not in front of you. We stood there for a while, not speaking, not fixing, just existing in the same space truthfully for once. He reached out and gently tapped the glass of the case. "She's the one they didn't see," he murmured, "but she never disappeared." I looked at him, really looked, and in that moment, I didn't feel like someone returning. I felt like someone arriving. They didn't owe me words. They only needed to look me in the eye. And finally, they did. I keep Ava's letter in a slim leather folder tucked between old mission briefings, and one or two black and white photos of my grandfather in uniform. I read it now and then, not out of nostalgia, but to remind myself that there are some moments in life when truth arrives unarmored. Not in speeches, not in medals, but in the uneven pencil scrawl of a 10-year-old girl who wrote something I didn't know I needed to hear. I hope you have someone who loves you too. The words haven't changed, but what they mean to me has. I used to think validation came in the form of acknowledgement that if I just waited long enough, worked hard enough, did the right thing, quietly enough, someone would stand up and say my name with pride. I spent years convincing myself that silence was dignity, that being overlooked was noble if it meant the mission succeeded. But silence, I've learned, is only power when you choose it. When it's forced upon you, it becomes a prison. That day on the stage, the ripple of gasps, the medal, the standing ovation, it didn't rewrite the past. It didn't erase the birthdays I spent alone, or the dinners where my voice trailed off unanswered. It didn't suddenly make my family perfect, but it gave me something better. It gave me the truth publicly spoken. Not because I needed a crowd, but because I needed myself to hear it said aloud. I'm proud of the stars on my collar, proud of what I've built in a world that never saved me a seat at the table. But when I think about what truly matters about the legacy I want to leave, I don't think about rank. I think about impact. About Sergeant Rivas tucking his daughter in each night. About young officers learning that strength doesn't have to roar. About a photo in a cherrywood case finally placed where it belonged. And I think about Ava, who saw me clearly when so many didn't. She didn't know my rank. She didn't need my resume. She only knew that her father came home alive. That was enough. So now when I walk into a room, whether it's a command center or a quiet family gathering, I don't wait for someone to introduce me. I don't wait for an invitation to speak. I've stopped waiting because I understand now my voice isn't something they give me. It's something I carry. And when I speak calmly, clearly, without apology, I don't just reclaim space. I redefine it. If you've ever been erased, forgotten, or underestimated, I hope you know. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy. And you absolutely do not need permission to own your story. You can begin again, not as someone waiting to be seen, but as someone who already knows who they are. Because you get to decide what chapter comes next. And if no one calls your name, step forward anyway. Say it yourself. Say it clearly. I'm here, and I always mattered. Thank you so much for taking the time to follow my story all the way through to the end. If this story reminded you of a moment in your own life, a time when you were overlooked, underestimated, or quietly enduring something no one else saw, please know this, you're not alone. I didn't share this for praise. I shared it as a reminder that your worth isn't defined by who acknowledges you. It's defined by the courage it takes to stand in your truth. If you've experienced something similar, I invite you to share your story in the comments. You never know, your voice might be the one that helps someone else find theirs. And if this story moved you even for a moment, consider subscribing to the channel for more powerful real-life stories, just like this one. We don't just tell stories here. We listen, we connect, and together we heal. Thank you for being here.